Bonjour mes élèves, pour aujourd'hui à la leçon française. Are we on?
Are we on?
You can
We're
cut
on.
this off though if it's silly. Well, you know Ron back in the last century, you know, the 20th century. That's the one that we had World War II in, and it wasn't very violent, but about 180 million people were killed in the 20th century in World War I and World War II. Now, I guess that's pretty good violence. But anyway, it's been 62 years since Dianetics, the modern science of mental health, appeared on the scene from the writing of L. Ron Hubbard. And so we former Dianetic people, Dianeticists, like to say that the year or the date is AD 62, after Dianetics. Now you might ask, has Dianetics had any influence in the real world, the whole world itself? And because a lot of people who may not know about this might think, well, I don't see any evidence that we have a better planet or a better government or a better universe because of Dianetics. But I want to tell you some of the things that came from Dianetics into the real world. Prior to Dianetics, if a person was having an operation, you know, a surgical operation, like take out the tonsils or remove your gallbladder or some other thing where they were cutting up your body, and they would give you ether, for example. You would inhale the fumes of ether and become unconscious so that supposedly you wouldn't feel the pain. The thing was that in the operating room, it was not uncommon for the doctor or the doctors and the nurses to talk to one another while the operation was taking place. They might even tell jokes or tell stories, or while they were doing the operation they might comment on the patient. They might say something like, "This guy looks like hell, doesn't he?" Or, "Boy, she needs to have her breasts removed," or tell jokes, or just talk about current events, because it was believed for a long, long time that when a person was unconscious, anything that was going around, you know, sound or smell or anything, that it would have no effect, that it would not be recorded in the same way that if someone is talking to you, like I'm talking to the camera or talking to Tatiana, she can hear me and she can remember this. But Hubbard discovered that the things that were said around a person that were unconscious, that was unconscious in an accident or an injury or an operation, that those things went into what could be called the subconscious, or the reactive mind, the mind that was not conscious, and that those things could then and thereafter influence the life of the person. Particularly during surgery, if a doctor said, you know, this person really isn't doing well, or I don't think his chances for recovery are very good, it was not known that those things, like post-hypnotic suggestion, could actually influence the health, the well-being, and the sanity of patients. You will find, because of Dianetics and what Ron Hubbard had to say about it, that nowadays silence in operating rooms is strictly observed, except for the few statements that are necessary for the operation to proceed. No more joking, no more kidding around, no more talking about the patient in either insulting or derogatory terms, no more telling jokes, no more anything. Now that's not 100% true throughout the world, but it is essentially true in the United States and in other developing countries, that silence is observed in the operating room. And this has contributed tremendously to the health and recovery of patients who go in for surgical procedures. So that's just one thing, and it's a big one, that came because of L. Ron Hubbard and his research into people, the human mind, and what affects life and people. And for that alone, I would give him a tremendous pat on the back and say that he did a wonderful thing just for that one thing. And anybody that's having surgery could breathe a bit of thanks to Hubbard because of a different culture, a different idea about what to do around unconscious people. So for example, if you were a Dianetic auditor and there was an accident nearby, somebody got run over by a car, and a bunch of people gather around before the ambulances or help arrives. I've done this myself. The first thing I do if I arrive at the scene of an accident is tell the people who are milling around to shut up around an unconscious or severely shocked person. I may not use the word shut up, but I encourage them to silence and only do those things quietly that can be of some help to the injured person or persons until ambulances or whatever is going to arrive if they need that kind of help. But the one thing that I really try to do about anybody who's getting an assist auditing or has been injured or shocked is observe silence around them. If I were going to say anything, it would be very positive. It would not be like, "Oh my God, he's bleeding to death." Did you ever hear the sorts of things that bystanders say around injured people? "Oh my God, is he dying? He looks like he's dead. Is his skull crashed in? Oh, there's no..." Oh, all these things are being recorded by the body because the body records everything in order to future aid its survival, not knowing that the things it's recording may actually, in the long run, act to inhibit survival. So you might remember that if you're around anybody that's in shock or pain. I mean, if they're conscious enough to ask them how they're doing, that's okay. Like if they're choking to death, you may have to say something before you do the Heimlich maneuver. But otherwise, keep your mouth shut. And you can put your hands on them, you can do all kinds of things. You can even say you're going to be all right. But don't start talking and saying, "Oh, look how badly he's bleeding," or "Look, I don't think she's going to make it." Okay? So that came out of Hubbard's work in examining what affects people when they're in shock or they're unconscious. And he referred to that type of experience, used the word engram, which in the dictionary, an ordinary dictionary, is defined as a trace of some sort of effect on cell or cellular. So that's what's happening. Anyway, Hubbard got that straightened out. Plus, he invented a method for retrieving those experiences and finding out what the content, what was said, what was the weather like, what were the sounds, what was being done to the person, what happened to them. His theory of engrams and Dianetic auditing made it possible to actually retrieve these experiences and take them out of the subconscious or reactive mind and make them conscious again, so the person was like, "My God, I had no idea what was going on when I was unconscious, or what those people said, or what they did to me, or the things they evaluated." He's now, this person, having made this conscious, this engram no longer has a stimulus response effect unknowing to the person in their life. And I want to tell you that's a big deal, because a lot of people are stupid, sick, unhealthy, behaving in terrible ways, not knowing what motivates them, simply because they have a certain collection of engrams that are dictating that behavior unknowingly to the person, things that are making him behave. So when you see people behaving and like, I can't believe what he did, or she, or it, a lot of times what you're looking at is stuff that is being influenced from their unconscious or reactive mind, forcing them to behave that way through stimulus response, automatic, subconscious behavior that they have very little or no control over. Most people have some control. Some you read about in the newspapers. Yes, I killed 16 people today. So the range of behavior that can be dictated by engrams runs from the most awful things you can imagine to light things like whenever I get near a hospital I feel kind of queasy. This is no excuse for behavior, and it doesn't mean that if you murder someone you can go in front of the judge and jury, I didn't mean to, it was my engrams. Even if it were, in order to make the society we live in, when you're in court facing a judge and a jury because you've done something like a capital crime, premeditated murder, whatever, you can't use these. Well, Hubbard said a lot of behavior is dictated by engrams. Forget it. You can't use that as an excuse for your behavior. And Dianetics and Dianetic therapy was never invented to make excuses for behavior, but it was invented so that people who wanted to know more about what was influencing their behavior, what made them act sick when they got around a hospital, what made them feel certain people were dangerous without even knowing the person. All kinds of strange degrees of irrational or aberrated behavior. Aberrated, by the way, is a word that came out of the physics of grinding lenses. And if you ground a lens, like for a glass or a telescope or something, and you didn't do a very good job, it still had wrinkles in it, that was called spherical aberration, simply because the thing wasn't smooth or clear. It was distorted, and so when you looked at life, it distorted life. And a lot of times people are looking at life through their engrams, and when they are, they're not seeing life the way you might see it, or I might see it, or someone who is clear of certain engrams would see it. They're seeing it distorted. We call that aberrated or aberrated behavior or aberrated look at life. Just look in a newspaper if you want to, and you'll see all these examples of people who are behaving and looking at life aberratedly. So what's Dianetics all about then? Well, I'll tell you. It's about finding out what might be influencing your behavior and making it conscious so that you can reevaluate and say, oh, I don't have to behave that way anymore. It's that simple. You can do this with anyone at any level if you understand a little bit about Dianetics. So, I got on this subject because I wanted to let people know, because some people watching this video, if they're stupid or foolish enough or crazy enough to be doing it, no, I don't mean that. If you're kind enough and intelligent enough to be watching this video, why am I laughing hysterically? Anyway, if you are, I'm hoping, unless you already know all about this, that you will understand that at one point in time, around 1950, a guy named L. Ron Hubbard came up with a subject called Dianetics. And one of its principal points of understanding was that it's possible to free human beings from aberrated, crazy, irrational behavior. It's possible to free human beings from a propensity to get sick, to get crazy, to get lazy, to be stupid. All based on the idea that there are a certain amount of things in the subconscious, what we call it, at least part of it, the reactive mind, that are unknowingly influencing the health, the well-being, the intelligence, the behavior, even the way they look. That these things are influencing them, and that it is possible, at least with Dianetic therapy, to help another person to be free of these things and thus lead a better, healthier, more rational, more understanding, more life. They don't have to be, quote, clear entirely. They don't have to become the class genius. They don't have to aspire to become President of the United States, God forbid. No, they'll just have a much better life. Even if it's only a little bit better. Even if their grades go from C to B or D to C. Even if they're happier with people, that's enough. And Hubbard put this book out called Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health, meaning if you could read it and understand it and do it, you didn't need to see Dr. Psychiatrist X. You didn't need professional psychologists, psychiatrists, and mental health people. It was a self and other help book. It did require that you read the book carefully and understand it and try it a little bit at a time on yourself, your family, whatever, strangers. But that was the whole idea. It wasn't based on, you will now put out a shingle that says, Dianetic Auditor, hours 9 to 4, $125 an hour. That came later. That's the business model. But the earliest model was just people learning how to help themselves and others to have a better life. Yes, you could take it to extremes and possibly produce someone who was exceptional. Chances are they were already somewhat exceptional. But the thing was, it sort of gave back the ownership of the human mind and what's going on. You know, Hubbard referred to it as the terra incognito, the land that was unknown, just behind your eyeballs. What's really going on? It's unconscious. And it made it possible for just regular folks, without getting a medical degree and then working in an insane asylum for 4 years as an intern, to help another person unless they were so crazy and so disturbed that they actually needed to be removed from society. There are such people. This wasn't aimed at those people. There were ideas that could have helped them. But in the main, it was to take just ordinary schmucks like me, ordinary people, regular folks, engineers, street sweepers, whatever, even psychiatrists. Yes, they were not considered the enemy then. They were just considered misguided. You could help these people just for the fun of it. It wasn't for, I'm going to get rich. That's the medical psychiatric model. I'm going to get rich. I have patients that I've been seeing for 15 years. They never do anything without calling me. I'm their psychoanalyst, you see. This was like, no. We, the people, can fix our own heads. We're taking back responsibility for the mind, conscious and unconscious, and doing something to improve the condition, to understand what's going on, to help our children, and possibly, if it really caught hold in a big way, possibly a somewhat better world. The idea that we're going to clear the world, forget it. That was never really the intention. The idea was to see if we could make a slightly better world. Not a clear world, but a slightly better world that had less excuses for death, destruction, disease, and all the even though that's part of life. It wasn't to try to get rid of life, it was to possibly give its potential a little better chance for expression. That's called Dianetics, invented by L. Ron Hubbard. He admitted that he learned a lot from the people that went before him about the mind and its possibilities. It's okay. We don't care. That's good. It's good science to take from those that have gone before, especially if they had found something that was workable. Not just theory, but hey, it works. Like that camera that's photographing my extremely handsome cowboy face. Only my mother could hear this. But anyway, so that was Hubbard, 1950, the book, Modern Science of Mental Health. You buy an old copy of it, pocket book, or at one of these places that sells used books for a couple of bucks. Read it. You don't have to agree with it, but before you say it's a crock of shit or nonsense, I don't know why shit got a bad name. We all do it every day. It's part of life. It's excretion. The word, well, anyway, I better not say it. Poo-poo. You like that better? Or doo-doo? God. Anyway, words are just words. They refer to other things. But anyway, before you throw Dianetics out the window because you couldn't understand the words and you didn't take the trouble to look them up or understand them, before you throw it out, give it a chance. Try some of its lighter approaches, like, which I previously mentioned, like pleasure moments. You'll see what people can find and re-experience and relive, not just recall, but relive. Potentials are enormous. And if you did nothing but work on pleasure moments, let alone the pain of engrams or shocking experiences or things like that, you could definitely help another person and yourself. And I'm sure you want to. Yes, I'm sure within you there's a spark that wants to grow into say a small flame, maybe even a fire, to help yourself and to help others and to help this poor old world that we're in the process of overpopulating and polluting. Anyway, I shan't carry on forever on this. I hope I've made my point, and I hope that you'll see that this was a tremendous contribution to all of us in the generations that will follow by a guy who lived long enough to besmirch and harm his own best name. But we're not talking about that guy. We're talking about L. Ron Hubbard, 1950, and his dreams. Okay, thank you very much. Thank Tatiana very much. Thank whoever invented the video camera. Thank you very much.